Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and it is that time of the month again. We're so excited to have our series, Colorado Election Watch. If you're on social media, it's hashtag CO Election Watch. I have in studio with me Ed Sealover with the Denver Business Journal. How you doing, Ed?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. And we have by phone with us Colorado Business Roundtable President Jeff Wasden. How you doing, Jeff?
Absolutely wonderful.
Awesome to hear. And our candidate today is the Republican candidate for Secretary of State and also current Secretary of State, Wayne Williams. How are you, Wayne?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to the conversation.
Yes, I look forward to the conversation as well. But before we get started, one of the reasons that we have Jeff Wasden by phone is an interesting fact. He was in prison today. Jeff, do you want to talk a minute about being in prison?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quite a setup, thank you. And probably not for the reason. I'm sure there are a lot of people going, I knew that guy did that. No, it was with the Governor Hickenlooper and Project the Fight team. We actually graduated 62 entrepreneurs in training today through a year-long program at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility. It was a pretty emotional, powerful day about second chances and reducing recidivism and providing a glimmer of hope, and a bunch of volunteers that come in from the business community to start to provide some business coaching. We had a little Shark Tank pitch competition that was absolutely amazing, and they let me out early. I don't know if it was good behavior, but they let me out to come do the interview to join Ed and Wayne and you, Alex, on air, so it's great to be here. With that, Wayne, let me do probably what I should probably know better at this point to do, but I'm going to give you a pretty wide open, open-ended question. Talk a little bit about your background and what really led you to run for Secretary of State 4 years ago and seek re-election. I know we've got a lot of listeners that tune in, and I want to give you a chance to really have them get to know the Wayne Williams that many in this state already do.
Thanks, Jeff. I've been involved in the elections process for a very long time. I was actually the finance chair for our elections committee in college, so it dates all the way back to the 1980s, I have to admit. But then in 1997, I served on the Canvas board. And by the Canvas board, that's the group that actually evaluates all of the processes that are done and certifies the results for a county. So I had the opportunity to do that back in 1997. And we had the old punch card ballots. And so one of the things I was impressed with is we actually had specific rules as to when a vote counts and when a vote doesn't, how many corners have to be connected or disconnected.
How many chads?
Yes, there were rules for all of that. So 3 years later, when I'm watching the debacle in Florida, where I see people trying to change the rules to benefit particular candidates, I got really annoyed. I began to get more involved in the elections process. I actually served as an attorney for the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder. Ultimately, I served 2 terms as the county commissioner in El Paso County. I was liaison to the Clerk and Recorder's office. I ran for that office then in 2010. In that capacity, I ran more elections than anybody else because I ran a number of recall elections that were special elections. I was hired by a Republican Board of Commissioners in Teller County and by a Democrat Board of Commissioners in Saguache County to run special elections for them. And so that background of both urban and rural, of being hired by both Democrats and Republicans to run elections for them, is kind of what caused me to say, I think I could do a good job as Secretary of State 4 years ago. I ran. I had the honor of receiving more votes than any other candidate for Secretary of State in Colorado history, and was proud to have that support. And since then, I've worked hard to make sure that I perform this job the way it's supposed to be done, and also that we provide the support for county clerk and recorders in the election area, and also businesses on the business side of the office.
And I think that kind of presages a little bit about what we're going to talk about. In fact, there's specific things that Jeff and I have picked out here. But first, let's go broad for the listeners, because let's be honest, we don't talk about the Secretary of State's office a lot on this show. You handle a lot of duties, some of which focus more specifically on business, some of which focus on broader issues. Talk about the primary areas that you wanted to concentrate on during your first term, and what kind of things you've been able to do in those areas.
Sure. Thanks for the question. And I think in providing that background is important, because most listeners don't grow up saying, someday I hope to listen to a radio show with the Colorado Secretary of State. I didn't. Where I grew up, there wasn't a Secretary of State in Virginia, and so I certainly didn't grow up with that. In Colorado, there's two major areas that the Secretary of State oversees. One is the elections. I'll save that and talk about that second. And the other is the business and licensing area. So the Colorado Constitution charges me with running bingo and raffle for nonprofits. So one of the things we've done is provided online filing that didn't exist before for these entities. In terms of businesses, we've provided for notary publics the ability to take courses online for free and then certify online for free. My goal is to make it so you never have to come into Denver in order to do business with the Colorado Secretary of State's office. For business filings, we run one of the most transparent and easiest to use systems in the nation, and we do that at the lowest business renewal fee in the country at $10 a year. We receive no tax dollars. We run efficiently on these very low fees that we have, and we've made it easy. So my favorite account is from a couple that had just been called by a bank who said, we can't close. We can't close on your property that you want to buy because your paperwork's not in order at the Colorado Secretary of State's office. They called my office in a panic, as you might expect. We did something different than a lot of governments do. We answered the phone. We then walked them through what they needed to do, and while sitting in a pickup truck in a field with a smartphone, they were able to file their paperwork, update it, correct it with the Secretary of State's office, and then call the bank back and say, hey, it's all in order now. We became the first state in the nation to have free online certificates of good standing. So you don't have to ask for proof ahead of time if you're trying to get a loan, if you're starting a new business. I'm proud of the fact that we have added over 100,000 businesses here in Colorado since I became Secretary of State. 1 million Coloradans make their living from a small business, either as an owner or an employee. So we've done lots of things to make it easy. We're open 24/7. There was actually an article in the Denver Post about people who file their business filings on Christmas Day. I've always theorized that perhaps you're tired of your in-laws, you want a break from them, and so you go in and file something with the Secretary of State's office. Keenan, as I was coming in, was telling me how easy it is to search, how easy it is to file. That's what I want to do, and that's what we've been very successful in doing, in adding more offerings online, in lowering fees. On the election side, it's the other area. That's the one that gets the most publicity. And frankly, because of the importance of elections in a democratic republic like we live in, it probably is the more critical part in terms of the average voter and their perception. In Colorado, right after I became Secretary of State, I adopted new standards that require paper-based voting systems and that are verified by the voter. So when you cast a ballot, whether it's a mail ballot or if you vote in person, you have the opportunity to review your mail ballot, make sure that the machine didn't do something quirky, like has been reported in some states. And so we established this process. I worked with counties, with county clerks, with county commissioners across the state to adopt the new voting systems. Virtually every county has done that. This new system then also produces a cast vote record of how the tabulation system interprets the particular ballot. And then a little over a year ago, we established the nation's first risk limiting audit, where we actually compare randomly chosen ballots. The closer the race, the more ballots chosen, with the cast vote record to make sure they match. And that's why I can tell you that, by the way, every county in Colorado passed that audit. And that's why I can tell you that nobody in Beijing, nobody in Moscow, nobody in Tehran changed a single vote in Colorado. So ensuring that that election security is there is an absolutely critical part of what my job is. It's also a part of the job to make sure that people are able to register and participate. We have the highest percentage of registered voters of any state in America here in Colorado. Part of that is because I've worked to make it easy. If going to our online voter registration, like 2 million Coloradans have done, is too hard, by the way, that's govotecolorado.com, you can text CO to vote, 28683, and that will get you started in the process. You know, Jeff, you spent some time at a prison. I just worked with the General Assembly to provide.
Speaking of prisons, sorry, go
Speaking
ahead.
of prisons,
Yes.
But I just worked with the General Assembly to adopt a new law that provides for those who are completing their sentence to be able to seamlessly re-register to vote. I've also worked by establishing new regulations to ensure that those who are awaiting trial in jail have the opportunity to vote, because we believe in America that you're innocent until proven guilty. So, Jeff, despite the aspersions that have been made here, you would still have the ability to vote until you're actually convicted. So we've done some things there to make it easy for folks to vote. And then, in addition to that registration, we want to make it easy for you to actually vote. And so in Colorado, we have been in the top 4 in voter turnout of every presidential election since I've been involved in the elections process. The states ahead of us, by the way, border Canada, where there's nothing else to do in October and November. But I've provided 24/7 drop boxes across the state, and I've worked with county clerks to accomplish all of this. And that's, to me, an important part of what this office does. So make it easy to register, make it easy to vote. You can return it anytime. You can vote in person if you want to. You can change your registration online. You can register to vote. It has provided a system that makes it very easy, which is why we have the highest percentage of registered voters in America and one of the top 4 in voter turnout across the United States. So those are kind of the areas that I'm involved in. It's providing that support to our county clerks. But all of this is why the Washington Post called Colorado the safest state in America to vote. And I was honored by that designation, because the Washington Post doesn't tend to favor right-of-center positions or candidates, but they recognize that what we did, even liberal groups like the Center for American Progress, have identified Colorado as the safest state. They've given us their highest grade. They have pointed to what I've done as Secretary of State as examples of what every state needs to do. So that's kind of a very broad brush of some of the things we do on the business side and also on the election side.
Well, thank you for that. It's good to know I could have cast a ballot while I was in prison today, Wayne. Thanks for sharing that, reminding people where I spend my day-to-day. Let's shift to a business issue. I think it's pretty clear most Coloradans probably understand the role of Secretary of State in overseeing voting and elections, but business functions really play an outsized, if not under the radar part in your office, certainly impacting the businesses within the Colorado Business Roundtable and many others. To give you an opportunity to kind of really share an introduction of the scope, what are kind of the business functions that you serve, and how much do they take apart as far as your time in the office, staffing in the office, and what kind of services do they actually fund within your office?
So most of the office is run on business fees. There are no general tax dollars that fund what I do in the office. And so it is free to vote. And so not surprisingly, then the elections part of my office is also funded by those lowest in the nation business fees. I've been able to reduce a lot of those business fees because we've established a number of efficiencies in the office. But some of the things that you would do is you would register a business. If you adopt a trade name, you do that in our office. If you obtain a property that you have a UCC loan or lien on, that would get filed in our office. If you're a nonprofit, you'd file in our office. If you engage in charitable solicitations, you'd do that. And so we've done a lot of things on both sides of that equation. For nonprofits, we've established free training for board of directors. And so if your friend says, hey, will you help me out? You love dogs, I love dogs, let's have a nonprofit that helps dogs. And you're going, yeah, but I don't know anything about being on a board of directors. Our website has free training for you that tells you exactly what your responsibilities are, has a pre-test so you know where you need to study, and walks you through that process. For businesses, Governor Hickenlooper and I just rolled out a couple months ago mybiz.colorado.gov. This is a seamless process for establishing a business, not just with my office, which is the first step, but also with some of the myriad of state agencies that you might need to find out how you interact with them. How do you pay unemployment taxes on your employees? How do you cover workers' comp? How do you collect sales tax if you're going to be selling goods? So I love the first question. The first question is, are you registered with the Secretary of State's office? And there's a yes button, and there's a no button, and then there's a what's this button. And it really walks you through in a way that's designed to make it easy for folks. We add tens of thousands of new businesses every year, and some of them become, the next Microsoft or Amazon, but a lot of them stay small businesses, but they're ways that individuals have a high quality of life. It's a way that they support their family, their friends, their loved ones. And so there are ways that you can do that, and we've tried to make it as seamless and as easy as possible. And I'm proud that we have been able to do that. So that's a lot of what we do on that business side, trying to make it easy for folks to do. But all of those registration processes are there. We've also made it, unlike some states, I mentioned our $10 renewal. Massachusetts, by the way, $500 if you want a comparison. So it's pretty stark contrast. It's one of the reasons why business in Colorado is booming, why you have people being able to find jobs. And that's a great thing, because I got 4 kids, and I want them all to be able to find ultimately a job here in Colorado.
And move out.
Yes. And I'm proud that they all have. They haven't all moved back yet to Colorado, but I was proud that all 4 kids voluntarily came home to visit last Christmas, and they all paid for their own tickets. So I thought that was a positive thing. They're in the 30 to 23 age range. So that's what we try to do, is make it so that whatever you may need, you can do that wherever you are in the state of Colorado. Whether you're a farmer in the field, as the couple I told you about earlier, or whether you're someone bored with your in-laws, so you want to establish a business on Christmas Day, you can do that. That process enables you to begin to live that American dream. And whatever that business might be, whether it's small or big, whether it's traditional or something new, you can do all of that through our office. We answer the phone. We walk people through things when they have issues. You asked what our division is in the office. My largest department, Jeff, is actually the IT department, because all of this we make online and easy. So making that work is the key part of the office in terms of its ability to provide services to people. But we've also got folks on the business side and on the election side as well.
And just go back and clarify something. How much of your office do the business fees fund? Is it 100% or?
It's probably around the neighborhood of 98%, roughly.
Okay. Okay.
And elections are free, and you're supposed to be free to participate in those. There's a little bit from voter registration lists or others that people might obtain. Something that's a service that we provide. There's a little bit in terms of open records. My office has also worked to make it easier to obtain open records in the state of Colorado. We led a working group that ultimately resulted in successful legislation to make it so you can get digital copies instead of just paper copies of government records. So all of that, we've had support from folks in the office, support from the business community. We've got a business advisory roundtable. We've had support from our county clerks. We've had a number of committees and support from the legislature. This last session, we had 4 substantive bills. We had 3 budget items, and the total number of no votes in the Colorado Senate on all 7 of those items was 0. Kind of an interesting contrast from the way things work in Washington, D.C. We have been able to work successfully with Democrats and Republicans. We've had sponsors from both parties and both sides of both parties. Joe Salazar and Justin Everett have both sponsored bills from my office. And that's a pretty significant contrast in terms of where they go and where they come from. But we have worked with people across the aisle, which I think is what Coloradans want, is a Secretary of State and, frankly, government as a whole that works together to make things better for people.
And it's You mentioned the idea that you've gotten a lot of buy-in, a lot of bipartisan buy-in. I think for people who've watched Secretary of States over the years, they know that's a bit different than, say, maybe your predecessor, who did a lot of things, Scott Gessler, but always seemed to run into opposition in the legislature. I mentioned Gessler because I want to talk about it a little bit. He spent a lot of energy trying to make the business registration system easier to use. You mentioned its ease. Tell me about kind of what you've moved forward on that was set up for you, and what kind of things you've done differently. How have you kind of jumped into what's been an ongoing effort there?
Has been an ongoing effort. Started even before Scott. Scott then continued that. I've continued it as well. There are different types of filings that take place at different rates. And so our office for a number of years has had a plan in place to make processes available digitally and over the internet. And we do them kind of in the order of how often they occur. And so some things that occur on a daily basis and with hundreds of transactions we did first. Those things that take place less frequently, we have added onto that process. So certainly the ability to file the primary filings online existed. We've tried to make it easier. I've tried to make the searches easier. The free certificates of good standing. We were the first state in the nation that made certificates of good standing available for those who don't run your business. This is the evidence to a bank, a lender, another institution that you actually exist, that you're entitled to do business. That's something we did while I was Secretary of State. There's a number of other areas we have digitized in the process. And it's great in a number of ways. First, it's easier for the consumer. You can do it night or day, wherever you are. You don't have to line up at the Secretary of State's office. So it's not like getting license plates where you line up at the clerk and recorder's office. This is something where you can do it wherever you are. You also then make it more efficient for the government, because instead of then paying someone to handle your paperwork, it's handled seamlessly, digitally. That makes it so you are not having to pay additional clerks. It makes it for the consumers easy to search without us having to go through the process of inputting data. All of that makes it more efficient, which has enabled me to reduce fees, in some cases by as much as 80%. And so that process makes it easier for the consumer, more efficient for the ratepayer, and better for the citizens. In the old days, Colorado, if you went to the Secretary of State's office, you'd be lined up, and you would have to file things in paper. That's not efficient. Doesn't need to take place that any more than you need to send, an order by paper to Amazon or King Soopers or wherever City Market, wherever you might happen to go and get groceries. We want to make it easy to do online, and that's really the process. And so it's something that began when the office first began to get computers. I think you go back to Natalie Meyer, where that process began, and certainly over time it has continued. It needs to continue to get better. I have just gotten approval a little over a year ago for the General Assembly for the next rewrite of our business software. It's over a decade old at its hard core, and so we want to be able to revamp that, continue to ensure that it's easy to use and changes with the time. That's really what we're trying to do. And we've seen what happens to a government if they wait years before they make changes, or decades. We're trying to stay up to date on a current basis.
Well answered. Thank you so much. Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here, and hashtag CO Election Watch if you've got any questions. Thank you. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking Colorado Election Watch. Here we have in studio with us Ed Sealever, Denver Business Journal. How you doing, Ed?
Doing
Still
good. Doing good.
Awesome. And Jeff Wasden is joining us by phone. That is the Colorado Business Roundtable president. Are you still doing all right, Jeff? We still got you?
Doing awesome. It is a great conversation. We absolutely love this series and the ability to provide some education, information for the voters and constituent business community about this important upcoming election. Let me jump right in, Wayne, and kind of tease up a question coming from Ed, because it's going to be around cyber and tech. And we are hosting a pretty significant cyber event on October 30th with several of our big business roundtable companies and partners, Deloitte, Microsoft, IBM, AT&T, Apple, to name a few, partnership with Colorado Technology Association. Shameless plug about the role of cyber. We'd love to have you guys involved. And with that, Ed, I'll kick the actual question over to you now that my plugging is all over.
Jeff, I would say on that, October 30th is smack in the middle of elections, so for us, it may not be the best timing, my friend.
Well, I figured you were probably just playing solitaire and letting the actual office do the job. But, I'll let that go. Duly noted. We'll pick up with you after the election. How's that?
Well, and let me tell you what we're doing. So you talk about that cybersecurity side. We actually have next week clerks coming from across the state, IT directors coming from counties across the state, representatives from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Election Commission, National Association of Secretaries of State. A number of my colleagues from across the country are coming to watch a process we are doing. It's called Election Preparedness for Infrastructure and Cybersecurity, or EPIC. And at this event, we're going to have a couple hundred people who are together planning and wargaming out what happens if issues occur in the midst of the election. So we're doing it a little sooner than October 30th, Jeff, for obvious reasons, because we've got an election coming up. But I'm excited to have this opportunity to bring county clerks from across the state to help them have the election preparedness on cybersecurity issues that they need. It's a huge issue that we have to be aware of, and there's really two things. One of them is making sure that people understand, or one of them is making the election secure, and the second is making people aware that the elections are secure. That latter one is important because we want people to know that their vote's going to count, their vote is going to be counted accurately here in Colorado, and so they need to have that confidence so they take the time to vote. We make it easy to vote, but we also want people to know how important it is and that that vote is going to be counted accurately. So I'm excited to host this event, to have people come from across the country to see how we do it here in Colorado. A couple of my actual elected secretaries of state are coming to visit as well to observe this process because Colorado is recognized as a leader in the cybersecurity area. Why it's one of the reasons the Washington Post called us the safest state in America to vote. But bringing people together to wargame through what happens if this occurs, what happens if that occurs. We want to prepare. We want to be ready. We've had the National Guard cybersecurity team in our office for the last 3 elections. And so we've been ready before it was cool to be ready. And I think that's one of the things people have to recognize. We adopted those paper ballots that a voter can verify. We adopted the risk limiting audit process before all of the reports came out. We had two-factor authentication, meaning that in order to access our voter registration database and the secure information in it, you have to have 2 factors, not just your username and password, but also a rotating factor. Other states are moving to that now. This makes it so if you steal a password from someone via phishing or something else, you still can't get in. There are parts of our voter database that are public. That was provided to the parties, get that on a regular basis, candidates, petitions, federal government's asked for it at times. Anyone can get that public data. And in fact, it would be really dangerous if you had a Secretary of State who said, only my friends can have this data. Only the candidates I like get to have this public data. It's important that you have a Secretary of State who's going to be fair to everybody and make that available equally. But the only information that's available, the only information that's provided is public information. Address, name, the year of birth, but not the date, whether someone voted in an election or not. But your social security number, your driver's license, your specific date of birth, these are private. They're not provided to the parties. They're not provided to the elections folks in D.C. of any sort. They are kept secure. And it's important that we keep that secure. And when you talk about cyber in the elections area, there's really three categories. There's the voting machines and the tabulation machines. That's that end part. That's the part where paper-based ballots, the risk-limiting audits, all of which I've established as Secretary of State, make it so you can be secure in your vote. The second category is and by the way, none of those machines are connected to the internet. And so you can't hack them from Kiev or Moscow or anywhere else in the world. The second category is that voter registration system. That's secured through two-factor authentication and through a number of other processes that my office employs. We block suspicious IP addresses. And so 2 years ago, there was a Russian-connected IP address that attempted to access our system. They were blocked. They never got through. That's exactly the way it's supposed to work. The third category, and by the way, that is online. Why is it online? Because you need to be able to do online voter registration, like 2 million Coloradans have done. By the way, I should note, if you haven't checked your address recently, if you've moved, if you, for example, have changed the address at which you live, go to govotecolorado.com. Make sure that you update that, because we're going to mail your ballots out in October. We want to make sure we mail it to the right place with the right races on it. The third category is one that, 4 years ago when I was running for Secretary of State, nobody asked a question about this, which is, well, what about efforts to influence elections? And this is where you see Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Instagram all taking action with respect to fake accounts that try to influence voters. And there's really two things they try to do. One is influence in a particular way, and the other is just diminish confidence in our government, to try to divide America. And you see them engaged in that. You've seen Facebook begin to block. You've seen Twitter also take steps to block fake accounts. That is not something the Secretary of State has control over. I don't think you want a government agency like the Secretary of State's office regulating what people post or share on their Facebook or what they tweet. But it's something I need to be aware of as an elected official. So we are establishing new protocols to monitor what's being said, so that if someone does provide false information, we're able to respond. Sometimes they provide false information maliciously, sometimes inadvertently. We had a congressional candidate that was telling people to mail their ballots by Election Day. Well, that's a horrible thing, because if you mail them, they will, on Election Day, they won't get to us in time. Use a Dropbox, the ones I've established across the state, helped fund and worked with the county clerks to establish. So that's a different part of that process. When I went to my first meeting of all the secretaries of state shortly after getting elected, cybersecurity was not a topic that was talked about. Many states had not done any of the things Colorado had done, and they didn't feel a need to do them. We were ahead of the game. We have continued to be ahead, but we want to provide that security so that people feel confidence. I enjoyed the article that said, Colorado beats the Russians at election games. But they're much more than games. They're serious issues that people need to know that their vote's going to be counted and counted accurately. And that's one of the things my office has led in the nation. At the national level, we have had multiple participants in the governing councils out of Homeland Security. I've been a member. My elections director, 2 other representatives from Colorado have been active in that participation as well, as we try to shape where things go on a national level. With the new president of the National Association of Secretaries of State, who, by the way, is a Democrat from Vermont, I was honored that he appointed me to the executive committee, the second Democrat to do that, because they recognize the leadership that Colorado brings. We also established a permanent committee on cybersecurity at the National Association of Secretaries of State, because it's gone from not being mentioned at all to being the subject of a permanent committee.
And let me ask, because there's a lot of information about how you're protecting voters' information, but there's a lot of business information that is on your site. How are you protecting that information? How are you making sure people can't get in and maliciously change information in a business registration to advantage themselves or disadvantage the business people?
Ed, thanks so much for asking that. I've actually talked about that before here at Connect and Collaborate. So some of the things we do, we provide several different ways for a business to secure their data. There are occasionally bad actors who try to steal a corporate identity to use its credit to obtain loans and do other actions along that line, to use their good name for nefarious purposes. We have worked to provide a number of options. So first, businesses can establish a password so that no one else can access their information. Not all businesses have done that. So if you're a business owner, take a look. Make sure you've done that. Provide that level of security.
I want to interrupt here real quick and give the advice to make sure it's at least 20 characters and not something that's easily remembered.
Well, certainly not something that's easily hackable. So avoid password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a whole lot of advice on having a strong password, but you're right, it is important. The other thing we offer on our website for businesses is the ability to provide email notifications when there's an issue. So you're told, hey, did you know your business has just changed its name? I mean, Netflix does this to me. A new device has signed on to your Netflix account. We do the same thing at my office. We offer businesses that service so they get a notice electronically that says, hey, someone changed your address. Someone identified a new business agent so that you know what's been done. So you're able to monitor it and protect that. But we don't stop there. We also provide funding to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to investigate business theft issues, cybersecurity issues. And we do that, and we're unique amongst a lot of states in that area. And the goal here is in part to encourage you, if you're going to engage in this type of nefarious activity, that you do it somewhere else other than Colorado, because we will investigate, we will prosecute. Not my office, but Colorado Bureau of Investigation will investigate. The Attorney General can prosecute. We have done that with people who have engaged in business identity theft. And so we don't just say have a password, we also prosecute bad guys who do that. And so we are working very much on making sure that business side is just as secure. We have protections in place so that you can't access it inappropriately. My favorite one, I got a phone call from one of the very large national law firms. They had done enough searches of a certain nature that our automatic system had locked them out. Because we have processes in place to protect those business data points that are there, the business information that's there, and we have automatic lockout routines that kick in if something suspicious begins to occur. This large law firm, Detton's, had done enough searches that we had locked them out. And I got this call saying, hey, we're legitimate, would you please let us back in? And we're able to work through, verify that it actually was them, and reset their privileges. But that's the type of foresight that my office has exhibited, where we have tried to provide that protection, both to businesses, but for any of your listeners that are business owners or involved in decision making or filing for the businesses, please avail yourselves of these free services we provide, that email notification, that password. As you said, Alex, make sure that it's not really simple to break through. But a lot of this is providing a certain level of security so that the crook, the bad guy, the bad actor moves on to the next entity that's there. Don't be the low-hanging fruit. And so we've provided lots of different ways that you as a business can protect yourself.
All right, Jeff, throw him a curveball.
No, I want to circle back to fees real quick. Obviously, you mentioned earlier that your office is very reliant upon business fees. How are those assessed? Are they scaled based on number of employees, based on revenue? Are they uniform? Do you feel the fees are appropriate? Or would you like to see any reduction in those fees?
So, Jeff, our fees are generally based on a flat rate. As I mentioned, it is at $10 for a business renewal. That's the most common transaction we have. It is the cheapest in the nation. So those are set by my office in working with the Joint Budget Committee to make sure we have sufficient revenues to run the office because they approve our budget, and then we adjust fees. We have lowered fees in a number of areas since I became Secretary of State. Particularly as we automate processes, it gives us the ability to lower fees. One of the issues we had that people raised was it's $10 to renew my business. It was $50 to close your business. And people said, well, that gives me a disincentive to actually shut it down, and we want our business registry to be accurate. And so we did. We cut it by 80%. We reduced it down to $10 as well to close a business. So we tried to make it easy and fair. We don't do it based on complicated formulas because our fees are so low that there's no need for that. That $10 applies regardless of the size of the business, and I am very confident that that is not the cost expense that worries any business owner. We make it easy. In terms of the budget, that's approved by the Joint Budget Committee. I've been honored that since the time I've been Secretary of State, we have worked with both Democrats and Republicans to obtain unanimous approval of our budget. We have been able to do that in a way to address ongoing needs and to continue to make enhancements in the customer service we provide. Things like the free certificates of good standing for a business, things like the ability for you to file bingo raffle online or for you to get free training as a notary public. All of that we've been able to do by keeping fees flat or even lowering them. We've not raised any of those fees while I've been Secretary of State.
Which brings up an interesting question. Where do we stand with the lawsuit that was filed against your office by the National Federation of Independent Business? And if that is still going on and FIB wins, how much of a different conversation are we having about fees?
So let me give you a little background. For multiple decades, the General Assembly and the Governor have chosen to fund the Office of the Secretary of State through the use of business fees. They have not provided general fund monies to provide elections, and that's been true when the Democrats controlled all the House, the Senate, and the Governor. It was true when the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the Governor. The NFIB, shortly before I took office, filed a lawsuit. Given the process of the justice system, today my office either has filed or is filing its brief in the Supreme Court of Colorado with respect to that issue. We worked with the NFIB and their counsel to have a streamlined process that didn't involve costly discovery. We provided information they asked for. We gave them what they needed because we've been very transparent. The budget is a transparent process. The issue in the lawsuit is whether the use of fees to run the whole office is appropriate. Again, not my decision. I've told the Joint Budget Committee if you wanted to change that, you could just simply choose to fund us that part out of the general fund. So I get to be the nominal defendant in the lawsuit. It's not been, because of the lowness of our fees, the fact that $10 is the cheapest in the nation, there would be some change in that fee if the court were to say that you have to fund elections out of the general fund. And then we would then be, on the election side, be competing with all of the other needs in the state. I think it would be a bigger issue if we were not frugal with our budget, if we were not in the process of lowering fees like we've been doing since I've been Secretary of State. Before, the office used to do some holidays, and so if you happened to do a filing when it was cheap, you were great, but it wasn't a permanent reduction. I've taken more of the approach of trying to permanently lower fees. So we filed our brief today. Supreme Court will complete briefing. I know there have been amicus briefs filed because it doesn't just affect us. For example, if you rent a park pavilion, can they use that fee to mow the grass around the park pavilion or just to refurbish the park pavilion? How closely does a fee have to be tied to the specific service? Right now, it's used simply for my office. I have made it so that we're not having extra funds that get rolled over to other purposes, and they're staying within my office. But that's what we'll find out, and the Supreme Court will tell us. I know municipalities.
So you're saying that if the Supreme Court ruled for NFIB, you would not lower business fees because you don't need to cover less things with them?
No. That's not what I said. The already low fees would get further lowered as a result. We would then be funding elections out of the general fund. I am confident that the General Assembly would say, yes, elections are important. We ought to fund them. And so you would have an adjustment. And part of it, Ed, would depend on what the ruling was. So, for example, the most vulnerable part of what we do is we help fund local elections. So after every election in which there's a statewide ballot issue, we provide funding to counties to help cover that. So that's actually a direct payment to counties. More complex are what happens for IT, for example, where someone might be both helping to update the business system and updating the election system. And so some of those processes get fairly complex in terms of how they parse it out. And so ultimately what I want is a decision from the Supreme Court to say, here's what you should do. And we'll follow whatever decision they make and work with the General Assembly to provide that need. Again, it wasn't my decision to fund my office out of those fees. That's a General Assembly decision. I don't run the Joint Budget Committee. That's the legislature that makes those decisions. We are going to follow whatever the court tells us the Colorado Constitution requires.
I don't know if I did or did not mean to cut you off, but I'm going to jump right into the next question as we're kind of running out of time here. Your office, Wayne, collects a lot of information on businesses. Is that being used or can it be used to generate revenue to help people in the Evo corporate recruiter space, much like voter data is today?
So, Jeff, we've made the decision to make business databases searchable for free. And so there's a lot of reasons for doing it that way. You know, my house has had, I think, 4 or 5 roofs. The 3 houses I've had replaced because of hailstorms. And after every hailstorm, all these people show up knocking on my door saying, I represent this roofing company. We'd like to roof. Well, you can go onto my site and you can check and find out, is this a legitimate company? Were they organized yesterday or have they been around for a while? So you can find that. When a nonprofit asks for a donation from you, you can go to my site and find out, hey, how much of this nonprofit's money goes to the paid solicitor? How much actually goes to the nonprofit? How much goes to overhead? How much actually goes to the cause that I care about? And so we've made the decision that all of those are available for free. You certainly could have a decision at the state level to shift and to charge for those searches. I don't favor that. I think making that information accessible to Colorado consumers and frankly to Colorado businesses who, when they are being asked to do business, want to find out, hey, is this other company that's asking to do business with me legitimate?
Where can they find your information on your campaign?
So my campaign is located at winwithwayne.org. It's the website I've used since the very beginning. Winwithwayne.org has that information, has ways to contact me, has links to some of the articles like the Washington Post, Safest State in America to Vote. We also, for people who need to do official business, it's sos.state.co.us. That's probably the best indication of the type of service I provide. Come look at my actual official website, see what we do, see how easy it is to use. Register to vote at govotecolorado.com. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, our pleasure. Thank you so much. Be sure to like and subscribe. And tomorrow we'll have Jenna Griswold on. Tune in tomorrow at 4 o'clock.